We're live in a moment. All right, we are live. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us here. We got Shams and Andy in the chat that have maybe others.
Shandy.
We've got Shandy here, so that means we can get going.
You heard there's a drink called a Shandy Gaff.
Isn't Shandy like you mix beer? Like they mix something with beer, right?
I think it's beer with ginger ale.
Oh my God.
I hadn't heard of it until I lived in Tokyo. It was like a thing. I don't think I've seen it anywhere since.
I actually think
thought it was something. Well, I don't know. Maybe it is something that happens in like Ireland or
I had it at a bar once. It was like I was looking through the beer menu and I like sometimes Boston. It's just fun to try something that I've like never tried before. And I saw Shandy. I've never heard of that. And then I got it. I was like, what the hell am I drinking? This is terrible. But like, Brian, I would think you would like it because you're like into like mixing weird things, like the spaghetti on pizza was one you were
That's
really
different.
Promoting.
That's not liquid. Oh, I still, you know what? I forgot about that quest to have a legit, what was it called?
Pizza-getti.
Pizza-getti. That was the hot trend of last summer.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
Beer and lemonade. Andy is clarifying. And
anyway,
Andy doesn't like Shandy. So what about Jean-Claude and Dams?
Like so I guess it's not a patron cast, so I guess we can't keep bantering too much.
Okay. Sorry.
No, I just wanted to
You're concerned I'm wasting more than just your time right now.
But yeah, for people in the chat, you can see, or people watching, like Mason and Trevor here. So I'll introduce them properly on the show.
This is how we sell the patron cast. This is like, if you liked this.
Oh, no.
Do this for 90 minutes.
But if you didn't like this. Oh, yeah, we have to schedule the next patron cast.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, we'll talk about that. Okay.
Yeah.
So how about I'll just like start the show. Like I said, guys, I'll like, edit. So like if you want to retake something or if there's an awkward silence or whatever, it's no big deal because I've got my little trusty app here. Oh, which Brian, we should probably start recording.
Yeah.
Our tracks. So let's do
I'm
that.
ready. Are you?
All right. Yeah. Count me down.
3, 2, 1, record.
Recording. Then let me get this here. Recording. All right. So now this is being recorded, which is very critical. So yeah, I'll just start the show. We'll see how it goes. Okay. Yeah! Yes! Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast, the longest running fantasy hockey podcast in the world, hosted by two guys who can finally tell our wives, look, I'm not even that obsessed with fantasy hockey. Just wait until you meet these two guys. I'm your host, Dylan Dabrowski. With me is the fantasy hockey robot, Brian Com, and a couple other people that we'll introduce in just a sec. But first, Brian, how's it going? Great to talk to you.
Hey, Elon, I'm good. I just drafted what I think is my best mock draft team of the season. We just started mock draft 28 in our like cupful like mock draft Discord. So we're doing all these mock slow drafts. We'll talk a lot more about that shortly. But this is my third. And I've been trying to strategy. I guess I don't need to jump too far ahead of what I'm doing.
Don't tease us now. What was the strategy?
Okay, so the strategy is I'm trying to fade. I'm considering fading D and seeing like what it leaves me with. And I really like and I've done it a bunch of times from the like I drafted from the like 12 spot out of 14 teams. But this time around I drafted from the 3 spot. And I really, really like my team.
Which D?
Do you want to hear it?
I mean, maybe not the whole team, but obviously you got a lot of good forwards and I guess goalies. But so which D did you end up with when you faded?
Okay. Yeah. So, you're not going to agree all of a sudden that this is a worthwhile team. So I made a mistake. Okay. Things were going really well. And then I drafted, the cupful has 18 rounds, right? You need 4 defensemen on your roster. There's 4 active spots. So in round 10, I drafted Michael Matheson. And then round 11, I took Sean Dursey.
I thought you hate him, but okay.
No, I don't.
Or now you like him because he's on Arizona. But Arizona now has him and Valimaki.
It could be him or Valimaki. Yeah.
Or Dumba. I don't know.
It's not. I don't think it's going to be Dumba.
Okay.
And then in the 16, and then so I made a mistake. I drafted 3 goalies in a row. I didn't need the second one.
That's fine.
In 13, 14, 15. But if I didn't draft the second one, I would have had Shane Goss to spare. But that's besides the point. I ended up with Brady Shea in round 16, who I also hate, according to you, and Kalen Addison with my final pick. So like it's not a great decor. I've got Michael Matheson and Sean Jersey, hopefully, both with some kind of challenge for the power play happening, but one that I think they'll win out. And then two guys that I will like very possibly churn. I mean, this is a mock, right? This is seeing who fell to me at those, but like my forward group, I feel like more that I don't have any forward weaknesses. I like my goalies. So maybe a little bit of fine tuning still to come, but that's there it is.
Interesting. Well, hey, that's the whole point of this episode. We're going to be talking all about the mock drafts that we've been doing. Like you said, Brian, we've been doing 28 of them. You've done 3. I've done a couple. And I've got a couple weirdos here on the call who have done, I don't even know how many, but they'll tell us in just a moment. I guess before I introduce them, let me just really quickly just set the table here in terms of like, first of all, Keeping Karlsson proudly presented by DobberHockey.com. Check it out. The guide is out. It's already been updated since the Karlsson trade and they keep updating it. It's really good. So that's at Keeping Karls. That's at DobberHockey.com. And Brian's been talking about the Cupful. For people who don't know, the Keeping Karlsson Ultimate Patron Fantasy League. We're already August 13th, which means we're going to be we might be starting drafting like a month from now or soon after that. And the registration deadline is around the start of September. Basically, if you want to play in our Ultimate League, it's not too late to register. Anyone who registers can get in. Even if you played last year, you still have to register. Even if you won your league and because we don't know, some people might not want to come back. So definitely get in the Discord. If you're not a patron, keepingkarlsson.com/patron, get in the Discord. Come on in. It's gonna be a lot of fun. And like Brian said, we've been already practicing. So you're already behind. You got to get in and start practicing.
And if you are behind, kkupfl.com is how you can find all the info to join, what it's all about. Like this is last year we had over 600 managers worldwide at all different skills. And if you ever want to like match your skills against the best of the best and have the right to say, yes, I am one of the best fantasy hockey manager in the world, this is your way to do it. I'm actually wearing my 2018 Cupful Ultimate Champion shirt.
The classic old Karlsson mustache
I need a new
logo.
one. It's getting a little ratty, but I don't know if I'm going to be, I think I'm kind of far from it. Right. Anyway, kkupfl.com. There's custom stats, there's bots, there's like Elon and I commission. It's amazing. It's going to be amazing.
We're going to make it good.
Yeah.
All right. So like I said, the plan for this episode is we're going to be talking about all of these mock drafts and having a lot of insights. And Brian and I, since we've only done a couple, it's not up to us to do this. So let me introduce the two guests we have, two people who have been participating in many, many of these mock drafts and have a ton of cool insights to share. First of all, you've heard him on our podcast feed before, and he's back. He's also, I see, coming up on 5 years as a patron. So thank you so much for being an awesome member of our community since 2018. Back on the show, Mason Geddes, aka Ginger Flow. How's it going, Mason?
It's going well. Thanks, Elon. I remember that first year. I was thinking earlier today how good Oliver Ekman-Larsson was that year and how he helped me win my league and how far he's fallen since then.
The 20-goal season. That must
exactly.
Have been. Yeah,
it's been a while. But yeah, I've done 7 mocks here, which I guess since the start of July isn't that many. So I don't know. I guess it's enough to have some insights to share. And I've been feeling pretty good about my teams, and I'm looking forward to the actual draft coming up in a couple months.
Yeah, it's going to be so fun. By the way, do you want to take a guess? Oliver Ekman-Larsson. I have data. I should mention Kevin Hebert has been compiling all the data from the mock drafts we've been doing, and I've got it here in a spreadsheet up to a mock draft 24. So it's, it's a little bit behind, but of the 24 mock drafts we have the data for, how many do you think OEL has been drafted in?
I think pretty much all of them. Let's say 2/3.
Okay. I actually thought it was a trick question. Like I would have guessed like 0, but since you're asking 1,
it's 2 according to this data. So maybe Mason's a big OEL fan still from helping him win his league 5 years ago.
My impression was that people were, thinking that to start the year he would be, getting some power play time in Florida, and so he'd be a good late round pick. But maybe people are thinking that goes to Forsling or someone else, or they're just not really thinking about the first couple weeks when they're doing these mocks.
Well, that is a good insight that I know you guys are going to get into about maybe you got to strategize for just those first couple weeks. Yeah, I'll bet you it's just people aren't thinking about short term. They're just mocking to see what kind of team they could compile. But anyways, okay, so we got Mason here, then another person, first time on the podcast, a patron for over a year now. Cool. Over a year now. really fun member of the community. Like if you've been a patron over this past year, you definitely know this guy, Trev, or his full name, Trevor Deward. Oh, I should have asked you this beforehand. Deward?
Weird.
Say it again, sorry.
Weird.
Sorry. That's a fun name. Okay. Trevor. See, that's why I need to edit. Okay. Trev, aka Trevor DeWeird. Trev, welcome to the show. You've done even more mocks than Mason. Isn't that correct?
Yeah. No, I'm currently in my 11th mock draft right now. I have a problem, but drafting is probably my favorite part of fantasy hockey. So yeah.
Well, that's awesome. Well, now that you've been doing all these, do you think you've gotten better like doing these drafts, or is it just so fun and you keep doing it? But you already were a pro before you even started.
Well, I mean, I do them mostly for fun, but I also do them so that I can figure out who like my personal sleepers are. And you use Kevin Hebert's mock draft ADP spreadsheet, and it's really helpful to figure out which picks you are getting later than everybody else.
I don't know if like now's a good time, Elon. So like, tell me if I'm derailing the conversation already, but I want to learn more about Trevor's concept of personal sleeper. Like what does that mean? Is now an okay time to ask that question?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
As the master of ceremonies. Well, actually, Mason did have his hand up, Brian, and you jumped in there. So I don't know what that was about, but I'll allow it.
We need Robert's rules going on in here.
But how about Mason could chime in with the comment he was going to make, and then we could ask Trev what he means by these personal sleepers.
Yeah, well, my response to Elon's question of have you been getting better at drafts is no, my drafts have been looking worse and worse. And I think that's just because people are getting more locked in. They're getting more used to these drafts and figuring out what strategies are working, where players are going. And now that the mock ADP sheet is out, it seems hard to find as much value as I was getting in the early drafts.
Makes sense. Yeah. And so anyways, the plan for this episode is you guys have a ton of insights. Well, I guess we'll just kind of go back and forth for a while. I've already read some of your notes. It's like really interesting stuff I can't wait to talk about. But yeah, Brian had a question for Trev. What do you mean by your personal sleepers? I guess just like players that you like, that you think you're going to be able to get later than you should be able to get them according to your opinions of them.
Yeah. So what I do is, I personally make my own projections. I think it's helpful. I think that you should go into a draft with, projections. They could be yours. They could be Dom Luszczyszyn's. They could be just a list based on vibes, but I think it's nice to go, it's useful to go into a draft with the projections, and then using that list in mock drafts, you can then do the draft and figure out, pick a couple players that you think that you are more high on than everybody else, and then just let that person fall. Or if you're not doing mock drafts, which you should be, you can also look at Kevin Hebert's list and compare it to your own list, or the list that you got from somebody else, and you'd be like, okay, I think that Mike Matheson is a player that deserves to be in the top 100 players going in fantasy this year, because I think that he could be a 55-point guy that everybody wants more, like Moritz Seider to be. And I think that Mike Matheson could be that guy, but he's going in on average the 9th round. There you go. You found one of your own personal sleepers.
Yeah, that makes sense. And hey, Brian grabbed him in his draft, and yeah, I guess there's a little bit of intrigue now with Petrie.
Flag, but I don't think he's losing his job to Jeff Petrie. And there's a lot of people convinced that Jeff Petrie isn't even going to be on the team come the season start. But
yeah, for sure. And thank you for sharing. I know that you're making your job harder for yourself now that and I guess we're all going to be sharing. I think my sleep, I've only done a couple of these, but also just kind of watching. if it's okay to just get into like sharing some of our personal sleepers before we get into your insights. But like I found Thatcher Demko has been falling pretty far. Like thinking of goalies, I know goalies are so like impossible. Brian and I will do a whole show about goalies, but I've been seeing Demko falling like further than like Ullmark, who like obviously Ullmark's going to get picked high. He just like is coming off a Vezina win, but he's in a tandem. Boston is looking a little bit shaky this year with Bergeron out of the picture now. Like Stuart Skinner, who I still feel like is going to have to earn it again over Campbell. I don't know. Like, I just feel like Demko's going to play all the games. And I think Vancouver, like at the end of last year, looked like super strong. They kind of like screwed themselves out of a good pick in the draft. So I feel like Demko, like you never know with goalies, but I feel like he has the upside to be one of the top goalies. And I was getting him in like the 9th round in my most recent draft. So I was pretty excited about that. I was going to fade goalies. I was planning on not even picking a goalie for like round 15. Then I got to round 9. I was like, well, I guess I'll just take Demko. He's like so much higher than any other goalie that I would take, and he's still around.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Like, because the Canucks I've sort of forgotten as being a team that's like, yeah, they're not going to be very good next year. Their blue line is really questionable, but they do have, like, of course, Rick Tocchet, who's supposed to tighten things up and make them more defensively responsible. The Canucks have like a third line now and a half decent looking fourth line. Like their forward group looks pretty good. So I don't know, Elon, it's interesting that you see them as kind of like a dark horse to do well. Like I still sort of feel they're going to lose several more than they're going to win. So I went to the ADP just now and I checked out who was going after Demko. Like if you passed on Demko and waited a little longer, you could have Ilya Samsonov, Darcy Kemper, Tristan Jarry, Philip Gustafsson, Vitek Vanacek. Are you like, do you still slot Demko ahead of all those guys?
I do. Personally, I do. Just because also the couple is big on volume, right? And we just added a point for wins, but also we have like points for saves and it's like saves versus goals against. So it's like a lot of games. And I feel like a lot of these guys you mentioned, like Samsonov, I know like the vibe is like he's probably the volume starter, but he's never been a volume starter, right? And like Wall looked pretty good. And anyways, we're gonna do a whole podcast about goalies, so I guess we don't need to dive too much into it. We do have these experts here to tell us about mock drafts, but I just love talking about hockey with you, so I don't know, I can't help it. But yeah, I think like Kemper, I don't know, it's basic. Like anyway, I think like Demko just excites me as someone with a lot of upside. And like, so if you could get him late, then it's pretty exciting. Those guys you said, I feel like we kind of know how they'll be for the most part. But okay, anyhow, let's get into it. Brian, did you have a personal sleeper you want to share with the class?
Okay, so I guess like if I'm looking at sleepers, I'm looking down like the last cupful draft slot is like 258, right? Or like somewhere around there, 252. I kind of just want to scroll up on the list to really give you a great answer. But someone I got really late in my favorite mock that I just completed was Cam Atkinson. I got Cam Atkinson. Where did I get him? Let me just, I'm scrolling up here. 236th overall, which is actually 13 draft spots higher than his overall ADP. He's trending up in the last 5 mocks. Maybe that's because we talked about the Flyers not too long ago on the show, saying like, you have Atkinson and Couturier who might kind of be forgotten from their injured season and coming back to a team that isn't looking too good. But I think Cam Atkinson that late, being a top line, top power play, 60-point potential guy, going like ADP comps for him at a forward position: William Karlsson, Logan Cooley, Philip Hedl, Nicholas Backstrom, JT Compher, Adam Henrique, Tyson Forster, Matthias Michelli, Quinton Byfield, Andreas Athanasiou. Like there's none of those guys I think are at all in Atkinson's league. So now I've guaranteed that I won't get him in my own drafts, but I've been very happy with where I've been able to land him in a mock. You're muted.
Oh, sorry.
And Trev had his hand up.
So. Yeah, so I'll just say one thing and then Trev could jump in. Yeah, I mean, Atkinson's the kind of guy I'll be really interested to see in training camp, like how he's getting deployed and what the Flyers are doing and if he's like looking fully healthy. Yeah. Trev, did you want to jump in?
So, I was going to say the same thing about Atkinson. Like, I want to see training camp before I'm, drafting him. I want to see that he's actually going to play. My other point, I guess my other question was like, what's the definition of the sleeper? Are we saying that the definition is a guy that you're getting in those last rounds, or is it just a guy that's going that you think is, 3 rounds or 4 rounds better than where he's actually going? Like, what's our, because
I just
Mike Matheson really isn't a guy that you're getting late, but yeah.
Right. I get well, it's all relative, right? Like where are you finding this guy? Like amongst whom is he being drafted? Like I just named all those guys around Cam Atkinson. And I think a sleeper is somebody who you draft at a time when like a lower tier of players is being drafted at the same position and he stands alone. So like looking at Michael Matheson, we can call him Mike, right? Like we're on those terms with him by now. The D drafted after Matheson are Seth Jones, Jacob Trouba, Thomas Shabbat, Drew Doughty, Devin Taves, and Rasmus Anderson. So like, you've got guys with Seth Jones is like an interesting, like it seems reasonable, but I also think Matheson's upside. I think Jones and Doughty could be decent comps, but I also think that that's still really nice value. He's been taken on average 118th overall in our mocks.
Yeah, and I think that like when you think of like point potential, Mike Matheson probably has the same close to the same value that you could be getting out of Doughty or Jones, but you're also getting close to 6 block shots and hits out of Mike Matheson potentially. And I don't think you're getting anywhere close to that with Jones and Doughty. So like just add that again, the Cider or the Trouba level are almost that level of peripherals on top of what potentially could be 55 points. That's my opinion.
All right, so Mason, did you want to jump in with your? It's obviously a nebulous term, anyways. These sleepers, like I just think whatever we're saying sleeper, we just mean guys who we think you can get at value, right?
Yeah, and I have like this like hot. I'm sure I've said this before. I'm sure many people have said this before, but like your fantasy hockey sleeper is dead. Like there's no such thing as a sleeper anymore because like there's usually this class of players like back in the days of magazines, right? Like on the cover, like 25 sleepers that'll win you your league. I actually found some old fantasy hockey magazines and cleaning up the other day, but like, this is it. And now that we can all share our sleepers with each other and there's like people making podcasts, like good podcasts, by the way, like if you look around or like, right, on the r/fantasy hockey or Discord servers affiliated with podcasts or otherwise, like everyone's sharing. There's no secret sauce anymore. So it is not just about knowing like who has a good chance to surprise or come up that might be off the casuals radar, but it's also assuming that you're not playing fully like in the cup full or in a competitive league. It's not knowing their names, it's knowing where to grab them to maximize their value. I think that's the new sleeper situation. It's not just like remembering, oh yeah, like I'm going to get this guy in all my drafts because everyone's going to forget about him, which is how it was, I don't know, a long time ago, like 10 or 15 years ago. Yeah. But everybody shares now. Everybody's talking about the same guys, which is fun. Like it's fun to all cheer together and watch together. But I don't think there's no, I haven't found, it's been a long time since I've seen like a secret name on the come up that only I or a small group of people are aware of.
I'm pretty stoked for Connor Brown, and every time he gets taken, I'm like, oh right, I forgot about him. So maybe, but again, Brian, obviously depends who you're drafting with, right? Like if you're drafting against other people in the cupful using like Kevin's sheet, then that might not be as relevant versus like you're drafting with your friends, and you're the only one that listens to these podcasts and checks out all these resources. Yeah,
and the sheets people are using are like more universal too. Like like so many people are using Dauber's stuff, right, and Dom's stuff, and Scott, like everyone, a lot of people subscribe to the same stuff. So anyway, but it's fun. It's a neat little wrinkle. I just sleeper doesn't quite, which is why I was so interested in Trev bringing up that personal sleeper concept, because I think that is all about like, where's someone that I'm more interested in than other people are, just going off of the ADPs.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, Mason, do you have a name that comes to mind that you've been extra excited about that you're willing to share?
Yeah, I have a couple of names I'll mention briefly, and I'll try to keep more to the sleeper concept. And I have a name too that I want to throw out there that maybe will even surprise Brian and might make him think this is an actual sleeper.
Ooh.
But a couple of the first ones. So a lot of the players I liked have been going higher in the more recent mocks, and it's been hard to get them. But one guy that hasn't gone up very much is Jakub Vrana. He's still going at like 186th. And once he went to St. Louis, like he was obviously on a really hot pace to end the year. And it's short term, but I mean, when you're pacing for 41 goals, like there's a chance that, he's able to keep some of that up and let's say be a 30 goal guy. And when you're able to get him in like the 14th round, and his ADP is probably only this high because I'm taking him in 6 different mocks at this point. Yeah, so that's one guy I'm pretty interested in. Did you want to discuss him at all, or should I just mention the other names I was thinking of?
I'll jump into Vrana for a second as like someone, he and Kasperi Kapanen, if I want to try and outsleep you, Mason, I can drop that one as like two guys who, changed teams, got into brand new situations and made a lot of their time there. And Vrana, got to shoot more than he had in a while when he moved to St. Louis, or at least, for a couple years, Vrana had not been really. Well, he hadn't been on the ice really to shoot, but it was nice to see him sort of reclaim these shot rates that we hadn't seen him put up consistently since like 1920, which was his second last year in Washington. And his percentages were not outlandish at 5-on-5 in St. Louis. So that I like that as a catch of somebody who I think a lot of us would have been like, he's been that sleeper for the last 2 or 3 years. Like this is the Vrana breakout year, everybody. And we talked about that happening on Washington. We talked about the potential for that to happen on Detroit. And now after having like a pretty successful turn in St. Louis, where like, I'm trying to remember what that top power play unit looked like. Like he was on the power play on PP1 for most of the last 10 games. And I'm just trying to like, Elon, what's your take on where Vrana is going to be able to settle in to the lineup? Like, is he going to be in a position to be fantasy relevant?
Yeah, definitely. For sure. Right. Like he was getting top power play time. I was seeing in the last game for St. Louis anyways, Rob Thomas, Kyrou, Vrana, Brandon Saad. But St. Louis has also been a team that's gone with 2 power plays a lot. So you got like Shen and Vucinievich like was on the other units. What do you even call the top power play? I see they both played like, over a minute in that final game. So that's the kind of thing where maybe everyone gets a little bit diminished, but at the value, if you're getting Vrana, like Mason said, in like a 12th, 13th round kind of thing, then definitely there's the chance that he can be really good. And also if for whatever reason he flames out, you didn't like waste a high pick. So I think that's the perfect kind of guy to go for, a guy who can give you a lot of goals, especially in a league like ours where goals are worth a lot. I'd rather make my sleeper swing on him. Like I'll take him over. Don't tell me if this is crazy, Brian, but like I look at like a Rob Thomas who is almost surely going to get more deployment and probably get more points. But like Rob Thomas never shoots, in our format, like, he's not worth that much. And I've seen it actually. I don't know if I mentioned this on the air yet, but like I made a version of Kevin's spreadsheet where I sorted people by their variance. So Kevin even gives us variance of like, for each player, like what's the lowest they've been taken and the highest they've been taken. And Rob Thomas has had a very high variance. Like let me just bring this up here. Yeah, he's been taken as low as 99th overall and as high as 196th overall. And the ADP is like right in the middle at 154. And like, maybe that's dumb, but I think in our format, give me Vrana. And even if he's not on the top power play, he could still score a lot of goals. It's my opinion anyway. Who knows?
Yeah, I guess the one thing to look out, and then I'll throw to you, Mason, like with Vrana, like I took that opportunity. Like he's going to need to be on that power play. 4 of the 10 goals he scored with the Blues were on the power play. And like that did like push up his shooting percentage a bit, but not unreasonably. Actually, Vrana's always been a pretty high percentage converter. And when he's been given power play opportunity, he's actually done pretty reasonably with it in the past. So it's not to say it's not sustainable, but I'd really like to see him be able to keep that up. And for anybody also just wanting the number, Vrana's ADP in our couple mock drafts is 185th overall. And
Mason's been pushing that up.
And Mason's, that's been dragged up by Mason. Robert Thomas is being taken 30 spots ahead of Vrana. But Vrana, like you said, Elon, has those 3 shots per game, just about, or at least he did for his time in St. Louis. Mason, what were you gonna?
Yeah, I mean, I see the power play in St. Louis being that top line of Vucinievich, Thomas, and Kyrou, and then The question then is if Vrana gets that last spot, or if that goes to someone like Saad or Shen. I think it's pretty likely that he at least gets a good chance there. And, if he doesn't do anything, he'll get bumped down, but I think he has a good shot at it. Thomas obviously has the higher floor if we're comparing the two, but I think, at that point in the draft, I'm looking for upside, and Thomas being a center too means he'll probably, fall a little bit further than maybe he should, just because there are so many out there. A couple of the other names that I have, one discrepancy I noticed was Bertuzzi being drafted at around 130 and Max Domi going about 100 spots later at 220. And I know people are expecting Bertuzzi to be on the top line and maybe get a chance at the top power play, but I don't think it's a sure thing. And there's a chance that Domi ends up, being on that top line and maybe getting some power play time. Even if he doesn't, I think playing with Tavares and Nylander probably puts him, pretty far ahead of a lot of the players that you're getting at around 220th. So do you guys have any thoughts on that?
No, I think it's a good point, because also like the top power play is taken, right? Like they've got Matthews, Marner, Tavares, and Nylander. So unless Nylander gets traded, or I don't even know, like Bertuzzi's not getting the top power play without an injury. So the upside is definitely capped. And yeah, like you say, like also like Bertuzzi and Domi could get in the top line. And also it depends, you have to stick, you have to have chemistry. So yeah, I agree with you. Like I wouldn't be reaching for Bertuzzi if I knew I could get Domi later. I don't know if either of them, like for a lot of times, like no forward aside from those four I just mentioned that are on the top power play have been worth holding. Like Bunting had a moment for a while, but there were stretches last year where he was getting dropped in drafts. So yeah, I wouldn't be reaching personally for Bertuzzi, though maybe I'm biased because I did like dump him in my dynasty league and I'm kind of regretting it. That's a whole other discussion that I had with Victor before.
It's an interesting wrinkle for me. Like I know your cognitive dissonance is hard to work against. Like for me, Bertuzzi, I don't think you're like, no, it's good. You're disclosing your biases, which is very important. I think like for me, I would think that Bertuzzi is the natural heir to like the Bunting and Hyman spot. And like you said, Elon, like Bunting was kind of inconsistent last year, but anyone who gave up on him was kicking themselves because he turned it on around January, if I'm remembering right, and then just flew through the rest of the year. And Hyman's done well from that spot too. But at the same time, this is also like we brought this point up back in, I guess it was July when Dubas was moving on, that like this is a team that might play differently than before. So even just being able to step into the Bunting or Hyman spot doesn't necessarily mean that it's the Bunting or Hyman. Like there might not be a Bunting and Hyman spot depending on how many adjustments are being made between the coach and the GM and how this team is actually supposed to work from this point out. So, Mason, you're talking about the discrepancy between Bertuzzi and Domi being like nearly 100 draft spots. And I see the contradiction there. I'd still want Bertuzzi ahead of Domi, but by that magnitude, I'm not so sure. And I just don't know. I'm trying to figure out if this means folks are reaching for Bertuzzi or sleeping on Domi.
Trev, you're going to jump in?
Yeah, I was going to jump in to comment on Brian there. I think it's a bit of both. I think they might be sleeping on Domi and reaching on Bertuzzi. Did I say that backwards?
No, you got it.
All right, got it. Yeah, so what I would say, like, I think that's where this is an entirely different point that I wrote in my notes, but I think that people are getting very excited about, the quote unquote sleepers that don't exist, the sleepers that don't exist anymore, because everybody knows that Bertuzzi is getting that, or everybody thinks that they know that Bertuzzi is getting that Bunting spot. And then like they'll reach over, without making a projection for Bertuzzi, because realistically, Bertuzzi, if you make a projection for him, best case scenario, 65 points, because he's never going to crack the top power play. Like, and how often does a non-top power play guy crack over 65 points?
Yeah,
and then people are pardon?
Yeah,
we're both agreeing. Yeah, not very often. I think like Jason Zucker did it once, and Timo Meier.
The only person I can think of that did it last year was Giroux. And
And he still had a pretty substantial power play role at times also.
yes. But people are, reaching, like taking him in like the 11th round over, guys that you could project easily for 65-ish points. And there's no red flags or risk involved with there, because there are red flags and risk involved with Bertuzzi.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. So I guess that could be one of your insights from the drafts is sometimes people may think they have a sleeper and then end up not treating them like a sleeper by reaching for the person and kind of like discounting the whole purpose, which is this is supposed to be a guy you can get late at good value. And I know you guys both actually have a extensive list here of different observations. So maybe we can kind of go back and forth here to get some of the other tips that you've figured out here. Mason, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, is it possible to throw in one last name? And
Never
this
hurts
was
to throw in another.
this was the one that I thought was an actual sleeper, an old school sleeper for Brian, because he hasn't been taken in any drafts yet. But I'm wondering what you think about Arthur Kaliev. And the reason I bring him up is because it seems like he'll be playing with Dubois and Fiala, which could be a top line on a lot of different teams. And he shoots a lot. And I think, there's a good chance he takes a step forward this year. Maybe he doesn't get on that top power play. It seems like that's fairly full, but at least having good second power play time, I think, that might be someone that come training camp, if we start to hear that he's doing well or that we know that he's staying on that line, maybe that's somebody that you could take a swing on late.
Okay. Elon, you didn't. Okay. Sorry. I'll jump in. Mason, you had me. I cocked my head when you said it. Maybe that is a good old fashioned sleeper, which either means you're a genius or that you're just like way off track by like being, if you're the only one talking about a sleeper, then like you got to take a look in the mirror. I just don't see like, okay, being the third piece of like the more Deneau line could be worth something. But like, if I'm looking at Trevor, like this is like,
he said the Fiala Dubois line, which I think is much better.
Yeah, I'd expect Arvidsson to stay with the Deneau and Moore.
Okay.
Like the last 2 years.
Yeah. Sorry. So if you're looking to be the third piece of the right, because Arvidsson, Moore, Deneau stay together. Yeah, I like it. I'm trying to think of who the comparable would have been from last year's Kings lineup.
Vilardi, maybe.
Yeah, right. Who was hot for like a chunk because of that top power play time. But it seems like a place where you could produce from, right? Like Dubois is a legit 1C. Fiala, is mercurial, but has had some startling bouts of consistency in LA. Now that like hopefully he's settled in there. So I guess it's about like if Kaliev can earn that spot out of camp, right? He hasn't seemed to be like fully in anyone's like great graces. He's had like very brief opportunities. I'm just looking through like the minor system in LA being like, is there anyone out of camp who could potentially challenge? And Elon, I don't know if you're able to speak to this from your like dynasty setting or maybe I'm not sure. I don't think we've covered him for a few years, but 5th overall in 2019 was Alex Turcotte. Do we have
I haven't heard good things about him in a while.
Yeah. And so I don't know that I'm trying to see if there is a Jack Hughes on LA who you do not want to draft. Also, one really great thing about the Cupful is that we take out all the guys you might accidentally draft instead of the guys you mean to. It's a really fun list. We'll tweet it sometime.
So I have a guy in my dynasty. I have an answer to this for everything you say, but I have a guy named Sam Fagemo that I hope makes the team ahead of Kaliev, but I don't think that'll happen.
What's his deal?
I don't know. He's just like a guy who maybe could play in the NHL sometime. But the Jets, by the way, speaking of like, if you're talking about Kaliev as a sleeper, maybe Vilardi could be also a sleeper, right? Because he went to Winnipeg now. And I know that people are probably assuming like, this is the year that Ehlers finally gets on the top power play because like, come on, like Dubois is gone, Wheeler's gone. There's got to be room now. But like, we thought that, last year when Laine was gone or whatever, and it still didn't happen for a lot of the year. So like Vilardi does have experience, like you said, Brian, on PP1. So maybe he ends up getting the spot with like Connor Scheifele and I mean, Ehlers can be there and Velarde. Like the Jets actually aren't even that deep. Like who else would be there? Like there's Nino still, Nino Ryder, Cole Perfetti. So Velarde, I think I would take Velarde over. I guess Mason, when you're saying Kaliev is a sleeper, like he hasn't taken any dress. Velarde, I'm saying has been taken on average 206. So maybe it's like dumb for me to say I take Velarde over him because obviously.
Yeah, I probably would too. I think there is a good chance Velarde's on that top power play in Winnipeg, and I think they split up the top two lines. They don't go Connor Scheifele Ehlers, so that means he would get someone good at least at even strength too, potentially Ehlers, which would keep him off of that top line that we're hoping he gets. But yeah, I like Velarde for sure.
Okay, but anyways, we could talk players all day. But we did want to get into your like strategies, right? We want to kind of get into strategy talk here. So we'll get into players maybe more at the end of the show, but let's get into some of these like insights, how to draft well, what you've learned from doing these mock drafts. So how about we could just kind of go back and forth? Because I know you both have like a really good list. Trev, do you want to get us going with the first insight you want to share from your mock drafts that you haven't already?
Sure. I'll go with one of my observations that I made in the middle rounds. And if you play in a league that has forwards as positions instead of just forwards, I find that there are a lot of good centers that drop in the middle rounds because people get stuck drafting center onlys sometimes in the early rounds. And then they say to themselves, I can't draft another center at this point. And then you've got centers like Elias Lindholm, Kadri, Trocheck, Joel Eriksson Ek. I got a list.
Yeah, like Horvat is around there. Even Kopitar is around there.
Barzal, and he's not center only, but you get the idea. But like those type of centers, like they drop because people are worried about fitting them into their roster, and I think there's a lot of value right there.
Yeah, and of course, then I guess the corollary of the strategy then is if you know that there's going to be a lot of centers that drop, then maybe that means when you're making your early picks, maybe you don't grab the center. Like if it's close between, I don't know, like Pettersson. And well, Pettersson's not center only. I mean, who knows? Like Yahoo also just came out with new positions and they like have removed a lot of dual eligibilities. We don't know if they're going to add them back or not yet. So I know Pettersson on Fantrax is like also left wing. So let me pick another example. Like, okay, let's say you're deciding between like Jack Hughes and Jason Robertson, and it's like a really close for you and you think it could go either way. That could be a good reason to maybe go with Robertson. Let someone else get Jack Hughes, even though you think he's awesome, because then you'll have that open center spot later on. And while other people are picking between like lesser wingers like a Jake DeBrusk or whatever, or an Arvidsson, you can be grabbing a Kopitar or like, you know, some of these guys that you just said.
Yeah, there was also like one draft where I ended up just like not being able to stop drafting centermen because they kept falling to me. Like, and like I was over it. But like I ended up with Tomas Hertl. This is before Karlsson left, and Logan Couture. I maybe this isn't a great as much a bargain as I thought it was at the time. I had Hertl at 144, Couture at 172. But like I also had Brock Nelson at 116 and Eriksson Ek at 109. And I've noticed both those guys falling in several of the mocks I've done because of their position. And Elon, I'm not sure if like my strategy changes in like avoiding the centerman at the start. Like, of course, that helps and like it gives you more roster flexibility, which is great. But I also just feel like maybe it depends on how flexible your positional eligibility is, right? Like in the cupful, we have 2 center roster spots and 2 util spots. And honestly, that's more flexibility than I think a lot of folks might realize. That like you can have 5 centers and you don't have to like sweat it too much. Like, yeah, it might be frustrating a night or two, but assuming that 5th center is coming late in your draft anyway, it's not like a big deal. Like Chandler Stevenson is another name that I'm seeing fall. And I feel like because he was amazing, right? Leading up to the playoffs and then in the playoffs, he's been going on average at 182. But based on the end to the season that he had when he had made it back up onto the top line with who was he playing with? He was playing with Eichel and like William Carrier for a while, but like or Eichel and Amadio, like Chandler Stevenson was doing incredibly well, and he's somebody who, despite playing center, if I already have 4 on my roster, if I can get Stevenson late enough, I'm just gonna like draft him and then worry about it later, because there's also going to be injuries and like other reasons for my roster to be fluid, that I'm not going to really limit myself. And of course, like you have to do that calculus, like you were sort of saying, Trev, like is losing a bit of flexibility on my roster tantamount, like is it equivalent to the value of how much better this center is over the next best winger? And I usually just answer that question with yes, like I'd rather have the better player. But we also, like we were talking about this on our server too, and on our Discord server, and some people were like, I will squeeze people who I see in trades, like, you know, because if you have too many centermen and you're trying to get rid of them, then you might want to look at trading. But of course, the rest of your league is going to see the predicament you're in, and they're not going to throw you any lifelines. Actually, I was in this situation last year with John Reed, former guest of the show, producer of Short Shifts, who had Tage Thompson and Tomas Hertl, and he felt too many centermen. And this is during Thompson's slow start. And I'm sure I've talked about this before, but I saw he was in a bind, and I was like, I was not jumping at a deal for any of those guys because I thought like maybe I could wait them out or do a little better. And of course, I wish I traded earlier for Tage Thompson. Mason?
Yeah, I agree with the idea that in a couple with the 2 utility spots, you don't have to be too worried about having too many centers. I think that's exactly where mock drafting comes in, though. For example, last year I had the 3rd overall pick, so I was choosing between Draisaitl and McKinnon. Just pretty glad about that, and going back and forth on who I should take. But I had done so many mocks where I knew that in the 6th or 7th round, I had these like personal sleepers like Larkin and Malkin, who I knew I liked more than the ADP, and I knew I was going to take 2 centers in those like rounds 5 to 7. And so I ended up taking Draisaitl just because he had the left wing eligibility. And I knew that if I take a center here and then I take 2 centers in rounds 5 to 7, that later on in the draft, if there is any value, I won't be able to take it because I'm going to end up having, 4, 5, 6 centers. I ended up taking Krejci at the end of the draft as my 5th. So I'm glad I didn't just take McKinnon early and then end up with 6 centers by the end of the draft.
Yeah, I ended up in the exact same situation. I think the last mock I was in, I think I saw Sam Bennett going at like 200th overall, which is, I think, a pretty good spot for a very good spot for him, in my opinion. And like I already had 4 center onlys, and you look at I think Elon made a tool for this. And you plug all the people in, and it tells you how many games you're going to miss if you have all 5 of those centers. And I think I would have missed like 20 something games, even in Cupful, by drafting Sam Bennett. And then you have to make that calculation. So
yeah, and of course there might be injuries, and there might be like a player might gain
you can
a
trade
position.
Him like they were saying.
Yeah, you could trade, that player might gain a position. But yeah, it's just like, again, like Brian, I'm not saying like I would like take the wing, above the center, even if I like the center a lot better. But like Mason said, when it's like close either way, like his example of Draisaitl versus McKinnon, or my example of like Jack Hughes versus Jason Robertson, just something to remember. There's going to be a lot of C-only guys that you might want later. So that's definitely a really good insight that you've found, and we'll have to see what happens. Because again, the breaking news from this week is that Yahoo dropped their position eligibilities. And by the way, just to remind people, for the Cupful, the way we do it is we're going to draft on Fantrax because they have slow draft functionality, which is really great because we have people from all over the world, and it's very hard to schedule. And also slow drafts are awesome and fun. But we're going to then transfer all the leagues to Yahoo, and that's where we're actually going to play it out. And we are going to make Fantrax's positions like match what's on Yahoo, of course, so that you're going to be drafting with the same positions, and Kevin's going to help with that. Kevin's great. Any like complicated sounding thing like that, Kevin's got a way to do it easily. But all that to say that hopefully Yahoo updates, right? Because right now Yahoo's positions are like everyone's just like one position, and there's a lot of C only guys, like Draisaitl's C only, for example. So, which actually kind of makes sense. Like last season, he did mostly play C, but he did sometimes play on the McDavid line. So yeah, we'll have to see. We'll see if Yahoo makes an update before we do our drafts. And if not, then we're going to be drafting. Then there'll be a whole other strategy of like drafting guys with only one position that you expect will have another position added later, you know? So if everyone's avoiding a bunch of C's because they have too many of them, but you have a good hunch that Draisaitl's going to get that left wing eventually. Well, maybe he's not a good example because he's going to be taken right away, but you know what I mean? But hopefully we won't come to that, and Yahoo will add some more positions and give us like what the general final thing will be before we start our drafts. But anyway, okay, so that was a really good insight, Trev. Mason, do you want to jump in with one of your insights now?
Yeah, I'll just chime in with something that's quite similar, actually, but I've noticed in a few drafts when I'm picking at the end of the first round, a lot of the players that are available right there, so Robertson, Kaprizov, Kachuk, Ovechkin, kind of like, in my opinion, kind of end the tier at the turn there from the first round to the second round. Those guys are all...
Sorry to interrupt, Mason, but I'll just point out, like, so it's a 14 manager draft, right? Just because every draft will have different numbers. So this is around like the 14, 15 pick mark.
Yeah, I've noticed exactly if I'm picking 13th or 14th. So I'm getting two of the 13, 14, 15, 16 of those picks. Often the left wings that are there, I end up taking two left wings, and then I end up getting stuck not being able to take left wings later. So very, very similar to the center situation, but I counted up the number of left wing and right wing eligible players in the first 60 picks. So basically the first 4 rounds. And there are 26 left wing eligible players and only 16 right wing eligible players. And so I found it really difficult picking at the end of the first round there to not take 2 left wings, knowing that in 2 of the drafts that I did when I was picking at that spot, later on, there were just so many left wings available, and I had to be dropping down, a tier or 2 to get players for my right wing spot. So that might be something just to keep in mind. Again, we'll see what Yahoo does with the eligibilities, but just at the end of the first round, you might want to be careful to not stack up the same position, particularly left wing, in my opinion, in that spot.
Did you, in any other drafts, take one of the, the top tier D in that like 14 to or 13 to 16 spot? Like I've seen like Makar going and Josi going in that particular spot often.
Yeah, so the first time I think I ended up getting stuck with the 2 left wings because Makar had gone, and I felt like it was a bit of a reach to take Josi at 15. But the second time Makar did fall to me, so that I was a little relieved that I didn't have to go with the left wing stack because of what it did to me in my first draft. And then in the most recent mock, I took Tage Thompson in that spot, but I do think he's a tier behind, Ovechkin and Kaprizov. So I don't think I would do that in a real draft. I'd want to go with more of the sure thing in Ovechkin, even if I end up having to take 2 left wing.
I know,
yeah, like
crazy. Oh, sorry, you go, Elon.
I had my hand up.
So I didn't see. Okay,
okay.
Go. Sorry.
Oh, Zoom has hands. We should just use that. I guess. Forgot about that. Anyway, whatever. Okay. Brian has a face now? What happened?
I don't. I don't see how to raise my hand.
You don't? Under reactions, then you do this, raise hand.
Oh, you're all showing off now. Okay.
Oh yeah, let's use this moving forward. That'll be so good.
Okay. All right. Okay.
You should go ahead, Brian. I'm sure it was better than what I was going to say.
No, go ahead.
Okay.
It's not. I was just going to say I prefer. I would take Thompson over Ovechkin.
Okay. But you don't want to actually say it?
I can. Okay, I'll say it. All right, fine. Okay, 2 things. I'm going to jump in and then throw to you, Elon. First is I would take Tage Thompson over Alex Ovechkin. I don't know if I'm the only one. I'm looking at I'm not the only one because Ovechkin's 18th in our ADP and Tage Thompson is 14th. So I'm glad that opinion's backed up by consensus, which is always correct, of course. And then the other, one basic lesson here, to add on to what Mason just shared about, keeping in mind what positions might be scarcer than others is like knowing your league settings is like a really basic draft hack, right? Like to know how many, like going back to the center thing, like how many skaters do you need? Are you just an F only league? Do you care how much you have to care about eligibility? How flexible or inflexible are rosters? And Mason, I like that little tidbit that you picked up that I hadn't realized. Every year it seems to swing back and forth, or every couple of years between, oh, there's not a lot of left wings this year, oh, there's not a lot of right wings this year. But it's good to know that this year there are more left wings than right wings available. So Elon, to your point where you were saying like you might pass on the center and go for the wing, I might pass on the left wing and go for the right wing.
Yeah, I guess just a counterpoint I'll throw out there is, unlike centers, I think left wings will be pretty easy to trade. Like maybe you're going to end up stacking left wings because you happen to pick a 13, 14, but I think there's going to be other teams in the league that could use a wing, and maybe we'll be up for giving up a center. Maybe even you could find someone who drafted too many goalies. I don't know what it'll be, but like I personally wouldn't be too worried about like ending the draft with like 5 left wings, because I would feel pretty confident that if I wanted to trade one, I probably could. Like another pick, by the way, that's going around there that I'm pretty stoked about is Brady Tkachuk. Like I could see this being the year. And I guess this is also the kind of thing we've said a bunch of times, but like he takes so many shots, and it's just a matter of like more of them going in for him to really break out as like a huge, he already like had a breakout last year, right? He had his point per game season for the first time. And I just see it still going up from there, right? He took 347 shots. Like it's insane. And he like, that's over 4 shots per game. And he only shot 4.2%. And I'm not saying I expect him to jump to like 15. Like clearly there's a reason, maybe the types of shots he takes, blah, blah, blah. Brian could go into heat maps and all these things, but I'll just say like, go up to 6, just like 6%. I'm not asking for a lot. And he becomes like a 40, 45 goal scorer. So all that to say, I would take Brady Tkachuk over Tage Thompson and Ovechkin at that spot. But anyways, that's personal preference. And maybe that's like an obvious thing to say. Anyhow, let's go over to Trev now for the next interesting observation you have from these drafts.
So I'll head way back to the end of the draft. And I'll point out that there are goalies with upside that are likely to get volume that are available in the late rounds. And I can, and I'll
give us like who,
sure.
Who gets your attention? Like who are you thinking of?
Like, let's say there's Markstrom, there's Korpisalo going, there's Grubauer going, there's Phoenix Copley, there's Merzlikins, Gibson, Binnington. Like these are goalies that at least have a very good chance at volume coming into next season, and they're all available anywhere from the 14th, so that would be like 180th to 250 overall.
Yeah, like I saw Merzlikins. Honestly, Merzlikins is someone every mock I'm in, I'm like, yes, I need to remember him, because no matter how, like my move in a mock or any draft is like I build my queue, I pop in like the next tier from each position, and like sometimes I'm really organized. Like in mocks, I'm not. All right. So like I am just using like the default sorting settings, like the projected season 22-23, like I'll flip back and forth between those. And Merzlikins doesn't show up on any of those. Like no matter like how you sort total points per game, like he's just not there. Projected for next season, what happened last season. So he is someone that you might want to like make sure to manually add to your list. Copley, you also mentioned, Trev, and I shared in our Discord group, like I feel like I'm getting him later than I should be able to. He's being drafted after Binnington, around the same time as Vejmelka, and like actually it's Copley, Vejmelka, Merzlikins in terms of goalies at the end of the draft, and then Marc-Andre Fleury after Elvis Merzlikins. And I think Copley probably deserves to be, and for what that's worth, that puts Copley at 228 for his ADP. And I think and also after John Gibson, I think Copley probably belongs in the group of goalies who are going around 200, which is like Ville Husso and Carter Hart and Logan Thompson, Markstrom, Korpisalo. Like I don't think Talbot is going to push him, like either based on opportunity to push or like capacity to push. I don't see that coming either. So I think Copley is, like, to me, great value for where he's going. And it is strange, Trev, like this trend you've noticed, or it's not strange, it's just uncommon to be able to find volume goalies, especially in a league that rewards volume, available so late in the game. But I think it just illustrates like how much faith everyone has lost in goalies. And it's like, well, I'm guessing anyway, so I might as well wait till the very end of the draft to make my guess, because it's I could throw a dart and hope I hit the goalie who actually does hang on.
Yeah, and we actually had a question on our Discord from Ryan, who was one of the couple winners from last year, like asking about like what people's thoughts are on our mock draft goalie ADPs being so low, and he was suggesting that maybe like in the actual drafts they might go higher, and like maybe this is just like people like doing something funky in mocks, and like I'll be interested to see like how that plays out. Also, I feel like it's so like dependent on your draft. Like the way I kind of respond, the way I kind of think about it is like, Brian, we're going to do our show soon, probably in like a month, like less than a month, maybe like 2 or 3 shows from now. We're going to do our Schmore goalies board where we're going to come up with our goalie tiers, basically like a ranking, just putting some goalies like just basically as equal to put them into tiers there. And I feel like I'm going to have my goalie tiers, and I'm going to have like a sense of like, I want to get at least one goalie in like the top 4 tiers, let's say. Like I want to have one of those, and then I'm going to then have like my second goal, I want it to be somewhere within at least the top 6 tiers, let's say, something like that. And then I'm just going to be kind of watching the draft go, and once I get to a pick where I think if I don't pick one of those goalies like now, they might all be gone by the next one, like that's probably going to determine like when I pick a goalie, and so it's like, I don't care if it's earlier in the draft or late in the draft. Like if we start our couple draft and then everyone's like taking all the goalies, yeah, I'm probably going to also like take a goalie at some point. But, like, again, but my strategy is not to like go super early on goalie. But like, maybe once, there's only like those guys we were talking about at the start, like a Demko, Kemper, Jari, like, I kind of want maybe at least one of those to start before all. And then, and then someone like a Talbot, like you're talking about, or not Talbot, but Copley, I like him, but I don't want him to be my number 1 goalie, there's still some risk there. Like, I agree with you about how I don't agree that Talbot is like going to be capable of like challenging and like stealing the job, but I do kind of disagree. I think LA is going to give him the opportunity. I think LA has shown that they don't fully trust Copley. At least that's the way I kind of see it. And I heard an interview was on Fantasy Hockey Life with one of the LA beat writers, kind of saying like, like they don't necessarily want, like in their best situation, like Talbot earns the job. Like I don't know if he can. I don't think he can, based on what we've seen from the past couple of years. But I think like they're going to give him the opportunity. It's just a matter of like if he can do it. And I do, like I said, Brian, I do agree with you that I think that Copley will end up getting more starts, but I don't think it's as sure thing as some other guys. Anyhow, Trev, you want to jump in there?
So I'll just give my 0G plug now. I think like every year, without fail, or as long as I've been playing fantasy hockey, which is not that long, there are like 10, 20 goalies that are either drafted very late or like you get them from free agency that become valuable. So like, I think that drafting goalies late puts you in a position, or puts you more in a position to benefit from that fact. Like if I grab Grubauer or something, or for example, in the 16th, and he doesn't work out, that's okay, because then I can just grab Kochetkov when Ronta or Anderson gets injured. Like, because something like that's going to happen where a goalie steals a job, or a team that's bad, plays better than expected, or there's an injury. Like, and then all of a sudden you find a valuable goalie. So put yourself in a position to benefit from that fact.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think Mason might have a contrary take. So I won't coming up. So I'm not going to go too much deeper on that. I will just mention that I also like think it's also good to picture like goalies like ranked against each other too. Like we talk a lot about tiering, and we'll do it in smorgasbord, but for goalies, like Elon, you were saying, like a lot of where you take a goalie depends on where everyone else is taking goalies. Like a goalie is not, to me, like worth a 3rd round pick. A goalie to me is like, yeah, that's the goalie I would take 10th. And that 10th goalie might be drafted, depending on the rhythm of your draft, in the 4th or 5th round, or that 10th goalie might be taken in the 9th or 10th round. So like one tip that I have for people based on my mocks is to not get caught looking at ADP for goalies and defensemen specifically, because where these positions are drafted is based largely on where the runs happen in your draft. And you can get caught unaware if like you could end up reaching for a guy before the runs have happened, or you could lose out on a guy because the runs have already happened before the round you thought he would fall to. So like for me, if you have ADP, like what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the mock, and to make it actionable for like the mock data, to make it actionable for my draft data, I'll take it, I'll wipe out all like the rounds and the draft pick positions and just have them ordered. Like this is the order that defensemen went. This is the order that goalies went. And the last point I'll make was going back to Copley. Like just to go full circle.
It's like a discussion with like lots of points in between that are unrelated, and then like back to the main conversation.
I hope it's good for listeners and everyone can follow. Well, like to refresh, like Elon, you're like, and I agree. Elon, you said that you're concerned that, you know, Copley lost the job once. So like clearly the trust is not fully in him.
And he was winning games too, and they still traded for Korpisalo.
Yeah. So, well, Copley was starting to falter a little bit, which is why I'm with you. I wouldn't want him as my number one goalie going into next year. But I will also posit that I think Korpisalo won that role more than Copley lost it. Like it was like, how could you not keep rolling with Korpisalo the way he was playing? So
for sure.
But I still, it doesn't take away from me sharing your doubt, like that little nag in the back of your head being like, well, he's been overtaken once and it can happen again.
Yeah, but that's why you get him in like 18th round or whatever, 16th round, just like Trev was saying. And then if it doesn't work out, you go with you grab Talbot, who probably won't get drafted. So then you grab him out of free agency if all of a sudden Talbot's like surging to start the year. Mason.
Yeah, I guess counterpoint to this is something that I've noticed in the mocks is obviously, you know, how late goalies are going this year. And that I will preface this just by saying I think those will rise throughout draft season. I noticed it happened last year too. Goalies went up 10 to 20 picks, so a couple of rounds based on where they were being drafted in the mocks. I will push back first on what Brian said a little bit. I do think the ADP does matter because, you know, if goalies are going in the 5th round, like they are in the mocks, like the top goalies, I would be totally comfortable taking a goalie there. But if they rise up to like the 3rd round, that top tier of goalies, I'm not just going to say, okay, I wanted one of these top goalies, I'm going to just take them in the 3rd round because that's how things are happening now. At that point, I might want to reevaluate my strategy because I think those 3rd round picks for goalies or defensemen are more valuable, obviously, than the 5th round picks. So I don't fully agree on that. But as far as 0G, I generally agree with the strategy, taking these late swings and, you know, finding value there because there will be guys with value. So you might as well take a shot on a few guys and see what happens. But with the goalies being drafted as they are now, I kind of see more value in taking goalies earlier. The reason for that is I think that, you know, if you're taking a goalie, one of the top goalies, let's say Shesterkin, who I would have as my top goalie in the 5th round, you know, taking these other more sleeper-like goalies in like the 12th round or something, that value from the 5th round to the 12th round is just such a different, different question from looking at goalies when they were going in the 2nd round last year versus a 12th round goalie. And so last year I was taking a 12th round goalie, and by not taking those goalies in the 2nd, I was getting so much of a better player, a skater, and then finding my goalies in the 12th. Whereas now, if you're passing up a goalie in the 5th and taking one in the 10th or 12th, that's just, you're just not getting the same, the same value that you have in past years. And so my strategy in some of these mocks has been to take, like I said, my favorite goalie this year, Shesterkin, in the 5th round, and then grab someone like Demko in the 10th round. And I don't feel like I'm giving up that much in terms of skaters. And then when I get to the end of the draft and I look at my team, I feel like I have 2 pretty elite goalies along with just a very solid team. And I look at the teams with these goalies like, Logan Thompson and Korpisalo, who were taken in like the 12th, 13th round. And I don't feel like my skaters have taken much of a hit, and I feel way, way more confident in my goalies. So if things were to stay the same this year, I think I would be drafting some actual goalies and not just letting them fall. I do really like those goalies that were mentioned at the end, like Copley and Merzlikins, because you're getting them so late that the difference between who you'd be getting in the 5th still makes a difference, as opposed to maybe like the 11th or 12th round.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And maybe I think we have maybe gone pretty far in the direction lately on the podcast of like goalies are so unpredictable. We have no way to know. So why ways to pick? But like there have been some guys like, you said Shesterkin, like anything could happen, but like I'd be pretty shocked if Shesterkin isn't great. Like Sorokin, like Jake Ottinger, even like Vasilevsky. Like there is a group at the top that if you can get them, like you say in the 5th round, like anything could happen. Like there was that year when like Carey Price like fell off, or like everyone was taking Robin Lehner and he fell off. But like I feel like in hindsight, like those guys did have question marks at the time. Like I just like, what is the question mark with like Sorokin, or Shesterkin, like Saros? Like I mean, these are guys that like the backups aren't challengers at all. I don't even remember who the Rangers backup is actually right now. It's not
Charlie
It's Jonathan Quick, isn't it?
Oh God. Okay,
Where is
Exactly.
Lindgren these days then?
Yeah. So Shesterkin is like a sure thing to me, like Saros, Lankinen's the backup, like Sorokin is Varlamov there. Like, so there are some like Ettinger. There's another guy like Jake Ottinger. Like, who's the backup there? Wedgwood still? Get out of here. The fake Matt Murray? Or maybe like anyway.
Lindgren's in Washington. I'm not sure why I made that mistake. My first thought was Yarrow Halak. And Trev, I see your hand. I just want to give context, like the tier that Elon, you and Mason are describing, like going in the between 53rd and 75th overall in our couple drafts are Vasilevsky, Shesterkin in order. Vasilevsky, Shesterkin, Saros, Ottinger, Sorokin, Georgiev, and Hellebuck. And then it's that's within a 20 pick range basically. And then it's 35 picks later when there's Allmark, 50 picks later for Skinner, and then it's like a whole other batch. But Trev, are you coming on to defend your late goalie strategy in the face of all the, like, I get it, like with volume and the cupful, like with wins in the cupful being like raised in importance, I can see why you want these reliable goalies on good teams, and they are rare and they could make your season. Trev, are you swayed by any of what you've heard?
I can be somewhat swayed. I think that I'll point out that, like, if we had this discussion last year, you would have put Markstrom on that list of goalies that can't fail. And my other point, like my other counterpoint, would be that even with the adjusted couple scoring, like if you reorder the couple points for last year, the best goalie was still like 40th overall. And it's like, again, of those top 5, goalies that you put in that tier, it's still a crapshoot as to which goalie that will be. And some of those goalies will still be, in like the 100th overall range. And I don't think there's that much variance in the forward and defense positions, which is like, and when I'm making a 5th round pick, I don't necessarily want that much variance in possibilities.
Yeah, that's fair. But like, just joking. Come on. But okay.
Can I put out a question, like in the context of this conversation, like just to take it, maybe, I don't know if it takes it a step further, but I talked earlier about how I'm fading D. I'm eschewing defensemen in my drafts. and goalies. Like I am just going straight forwards for the first, and this is my mock strategy, right? Like mock draft is where you can see how things feel, try a couple different strategies, look at the teams you end up with. So this is how I'm using our multitude of mock draft opportunities in our community. So I guess, do you feel like it's most important to, if I wanted to get one top tier player in a position, interrupt my run of 10 forwards to start a draft, what's the feeling in the room here about making sure I have a top tier goalie or a top tier defenseman?
I'll give my answer, which is defenseman, because I think it's like almost for sure, or very extremely unlikely that you're going to find in free agency a defenseman that's going to produce like a top tier defenseman. But with goalies in any given week, like you can get like a, Binnington stinks and Joel Hofer comes in, and next thing you know, Hofer is like the goalie of the week. And that's like a totally reasonable thing that could happen in a playoff week. But like, who are you going to find? Like, I guess some people got Mike Matheson, who's getting maybe more name drops in this episode than ever before. Well, it obviously has happened that you can get a defense. I remember there was the year that Shane Gostisbehere came out of nowhere, and then he became good. I'm trying to think of other examples of defensemen that I remember. Klingberg, Brian, remember there was like, this is early in the podcast, but I think Klingberg came out of nowhere in Dallas. Like he wasn't drafted in any league.
Yeah.
And he came in and was really good. So it could happen, but it's like super unlikely. So I'd rather just get like at least a couple really good defensemen, because otherwise like there's no chance that you're getting one.
I would be really interested to hear like more examples if anyone can think of them. Like like I can think of Klingberg, I can think of Gostisbehere. I think Noah Dobson in the same season went from like irrelevant to producing like a top. He hasn't sustained it, but those are the few examples off the top of my head. Trev, what do you think?
First off, I can't remember the name, but I think it was 2 seasons ago, the guy that took over for Dougie Hamilton when he was injured. I forget that was.
Severson.
Severson. Yeah.
That's true. He was good for a bit.
The other thing I found by fading D, or just whatever position that you fade, that ends up being the position that you end up streaming by necessity because you faded that position. And I think that I personally would rather stream forwards and goalies. So by fading D, you end up by necessity streaming D. So I think I would choose to have pick some like high quality defenseman.
That's interesting. Like D are really frustrating to stream, especially if you're looking for someone to hold on to. I know I went through a solid couple months last year where I was streaming defensemen until I had one healthy defenseman on my roster. I eventually filled the other 3 spots with guys I felt like keeping, but it took a while and it was annoying. Although you could also say, well, D have like, reasonable floor, like they're not going to outperform it by much. But if you look at the top end of FA, you might find it. And it's also actually takes me back to our conversation like earlier about centers. Like the thing about also drafting too many centers that I didn't find a problem is I've actually ended up with too few centers before, and streaming in centers is hard. It's frustrating. Like, I don't know if this is just a personal experience, but I have had a hard time filling empty C spots over the last few years in fantasy when I have been short. I find wingers are like the easiest to stream in, and then probably goalies, and then centers, and then defensemen, if I had to sort of rank the positions. But that's another reason why I don't mind ending up with too many centers, because too few has also been an issue for me. But that's maybe that's taking it too far back in the show.
Interesting. Sorry, go ahead.
I think I agree with Elon that there is, it is very unlikely to find an interesting D. So if you end up streaming D, and you're more likely to find an interesting forward or an interesting goalie. So I'd like to fill my D slots with people that I actually want to hold before I get to like the streaming rounds of like 14 through 18.
Can I throw out another, since we're talking about streaming D, let me throw out a defenseman kind of like the Kaliev that Mason threw out, who I don't think has been drafted at all in any drafts. But we just mentioned him recently when Trevi brought up that he took over from Hamilton when he got injured in New Jersey. Damon Severson going to Columbus. like, okay, apropos of nothing, I'm just gonna say, like, I'm looking at the Dauber guide right now, which I, pumped up at the start, and I don't know what he's basing this on. Like, it just might just be a hunch. But Dauber has Severson on a 3 forward, 2 defenseman top power play and 47 points for Severson. So who knows what'll happen? But there are believers, as one Mr. Daryl Dobbs believes that Severson is at least worth drafting and could be good. So obviously we'll learn more in camp and whatever, but he has shown that he has offensive potential when given the opportunity in that year in New Jersey. So maybe I wouldn't leave him undrafted. Like, I don't know. There's a lot of fun picks at the end of the draft. Maybe that's where you want to take your, Luke Hughes or Logan Cooley, like just take like a swing on a prospect or something. But maybe Severson is another person you should add to that list of like someone to take a swing on and see what he could do on a new team.
I can fill in like one small piece of the blank, which is that like Dauber has, if you go to Frozen Tools or Frozen Pool, whichever one it's called both. It's at frozenpool.daubersports.com, but it's called Frozen Tools. Both work. Zach Werenski is Band-Aid Boy certified. So I have a feeling that has something to do with it. Yeah.
Well, no. I'm looking at the, on his guide page. He has like all the players there. He has Werenski also on PP1. He has Gaudreau, Jenner, Laine, Werenski, Severson.
Well, maybe he feels a little more emboldened considering like how much time Werenski has missed over the last few years. But yes, you're right. Like you're looking for that fourth forward on the Columbus top power play. And like, it's wide open, right? Like it could be Marchenko, it could be Roslovic, it could be Kent Johnson. I don't know. Could it be Alex Texier at this point?
Fantilli could get it, but that would be early. Yeah.
There's a lot of like Cole Sillinger's even in the picture too. So
if he makes the team.
Trev, you had your hand up.
I was just going to bring up the Fantilli point. That it could be Fantilli.
All right. So how about next up, we can jump back to Mason. I think years ago, Trev brought up the goalie insight that he had. So Mason, what do you have next on your list of things you've noticed in these drafts?
Yeah, I guess this is kind of more of a specific situation, but I've noticed in a few drafts, the McDavid manager, usually, sometimes Draisaitl, but usually McDavid, will end up stacking a couple other Oilers with him because of the third round reversal. Whoever picks first overall has a pick at the end of the third and the start of the fourth. And right in that early fourth range, you have Bouchard, Hyman, Kane, and Nugent Hopkins all generally going in that area. And I'm just wondering, I don't know what you might think about, I generally against stacking, and I think you are too, but whether it might be worth stacking with McDavid. If McDavid gets injured or underperforms, you're probably not going to win your season anyway. So, might it be worth just grabbing a couple other players that are going to be along for the ride with that same power play and just see what happens? If you're trying to shoot for a fast track title, it might be worth just grabbing a bunch of these players and seeing if they all hit, you could have an insane season.
I think it's a fun idea for sure. And like the thing is, like with the Hyman, Kane, like RNH, like they're not all guaranteed to play with McDavid. So you have to also kind of, not only have McDavid. I mean, McDavid's not going to underperform, but I guess whatever, not get injured, whatever. But also, you have to kind of pick the right guy there. But you're saying, if you do hit right, it could be huge. Bouchard though, like I think in the fourth round, that's a great time to get Bouchard if you can get him, because I think he's still kind of underrated. I wonder how it's going to look once we actually get to drafts. But if you look at the D taken ahead of Bouchard, I'm just going to go through the ADP right now from our mocks. You've got Makar, Josi, Dahlin, Dougie Hamilton, Erik Karlsson, Miro Heiskanen, Adam Fox, and then scrolling, John Karlsson. So we're still waiting a while. Brandon Montour? What? Quinn Hughes? Sergachev? Did I just miss Bouchard here? Oh, I did. Okay, sorry. So Bouchard was after Adam Fox. But still, so there's quite a few defensemen, and like some of them I think that Bouchard might have higher upside, like just like being this top guy on Edmonton with no competition, is I just feel like people are not fully wrapping their heads around like how huge this could be. So I could see him easily getting like 70, 80 points, and who knows, he's still super young. So maybe he even has upside for more. Like maybe he can have like an Erik Karlsson type season. Like I would would it be crazy to say that I would take Bouchard over Erik Karlsson for next year?
No.
That's where
Yeah,
I'm at.
like I love that take. I think it's perfectly reasonable. Like there's fewer question marks. I have 0 question marks for Evan Bouchard. I don't know if anybody does. Like to me, there's no flag there. With Karlsson, you've got the new team flag, you've got the older flag, you've got the full power play flag, age, injury. Like there's a whole host of concerns that don't go away with one fantastic return to form. And like Karlsson could still very well end up in a like fall in the 60-70 point range, and that's great. Like I would still be happy with that from Karlsson this year. I wouldn't be like, oh, I can't believe he didn't like have another 100-point season. Whereas Bouchard, I feel like that is also going to be automatic. There's upside for more, like there is with Karlsson. And again, for me, like none of the red flags. Like I guess, like I don't know if anyone still thinks like Ekholm might get some play, but I don't see why that would happen, as I didn't at the time when Barry was first traded. But yeah, Bouchard going 43rd in our ADP right now is what is he, like the 7th or 8th defenseman being taken? So that's like I think that's reasonable. I'm just looking down the list. So Karlsson is being taken 34th overall as the 5th defenseman taken. But
Yeah, like even like
I'll wait for Bouchard.
Like I like Rasmus Dahlin a lot. Like I'll take Bouchard over Dahlin, who's going a lot higher. So I don't know. I guess it'll be fun to see how it plays out next year. I know Derek Trev's giving me a look like I don't know about that one, but it's just like anyway. So Mason, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, I would also take Dahlin over Bouchard, but I do like Bouchard where he's going. And just with Brian mentioning his ADP of 43, that's the first pick of the 4th round. So McDavid has gone at first overall every single time. It seems like a lot of people are taking that pick. And then obviously, if you did want to go fully in on the stack, I think Nugent Hopkins is obviously the best, most likely to have top power play. He's done that for like 6 years. And then Hyman, maybe more if you're looking for even strength pairing with McDavid.
Totally. So Trev, want to jump in next with your next observation you've seen?
Sure. So first, a question for Elon. Are you planning on doing a draft edition of a matchup maximizer?
Okay, I was planning on doing that. Yes, I keep on delaying it because so what you're talking about is like for the first couple weeks of the season that people can use for their drafts, because this is a really good suggestion. Was it you who suggested it in the Discord? Was
I might have. I also put it in my notes for the episode.
Okay, yeah, someone suggested that like it's a really good tip, right? So in general, when you're drafting, think of like your last couple picks. These are guys you're going to stream, right? And so if you take that a step further, what kinds of players do you stream? You stream players with good schedules. So why not make your last couple picks players on teams with really good schedules for the first couple weeks? You don't have to waste early streams. So, like imagine if you take swings on guys just to realize afterwards, oh, this player only plays like 2 times over the first 2 weeks or whatever. So yeah, I'm going to do a matchup maximizer, which is for new listeners, a show I was doing last year in the second half, like every week, just kind of looking at the next week's schedule to look at who you could stream in, who has like teams that play a lot on off days is obviously better than playing on busy days. So I am planning on doing that now that Yahoo has opened. They just opened this past week, so now I can get a sense of what the schedule will look like for the first couple of weeks on Yahoo, just to see if they like combine weeks or not. I haven't actually checked yet, but yeah, I'll be dropping that sometime the next like couple weeks. And I guess that's going to be your tip, right? That people should be looking at the schedule.
I've got a list of a couple of teams that have good schedules, bad schedules. But you can do that in an episode, or do you want the list?
Well, just give us a couple notable teams. Yeah.
Okay, so these are teams with, in the first 3 weeks, 8 or 9 games and 5+ off nights. So that would be Calgary, Washington, and New Jersey. So those are teams with good schedules for the first 3 weeks.
All right, so can we dive in here? Calgary, Washington, and New Jersey. Who's like a player that you would take, like in like, let's like all like maybe brainstorm or come up with a couple like in the rounds like 16, 17, 18. Who are you looking at from those teams?
Dawson Mercer, you've got Mangiapane in Pelche. Maybe if Dylan Strome falls that far.
Or Mikhail Backlund is another guy who might go undrafted, who would be really valuable, who could be really valuable in those early days.
My first thought was Pelletier too, just at the chance of I think he has a chance for really good deployment this year if he can take a step forward, and they have a new coach, so we'll see what happens. What were the other teams again? Chicago and
No, Washington,
Oh,
New
sorry.
Jersey, and Calgary.
Washington, New Jersey.
One name that jumps out to me, which I don't know, like maybe it depends kind of if you're in a draft with people who love prospects or not, but I'm pretty stoked about Luke Hughes coming in and having potentially a really good rookie year. But especially if you could take him late and there's like a good schedule on New Jersey anyways to start, then it's like, why not? Right? Like take him, get those 8-9 games over 3 weeks, and then if he stinks, you could just drop him. But like Luke Hughes is someone I would grab there, but maybe he's going to be going earlier in drafts for people who like are
How
excited.
how far is Tom Wilson falling? Probably not that far.
I don't think you're getting him that late, but even when you're in the mid round, right? Like if you're deciding who to take and you're getting like some people, like I stream a lot, like I need like 4 stream spots, 5 stream spots to start because I'm going to be finding guys on free agency right away and I'm going to need to have people to drop. So not that I would drop Tom Wilson, but
So can I like since we're talking about Luke Hughes for a second,
hit me.
Like this to me does not feel exactly like an Owen Power situation from last year where we had like this new, stud, like future top pairing upside defenseman, tons of offense in his career so far, showing up on a team and having like no power play role to speak of. Oh, and like coming out of college too. I just don't know like how big an opportunity Luke Hughes is actually going to be able to have here. Like,
well, why do you say no power play opportunity at all? Like, why couldn't he be the quarterback of the second
from
power play?
Oh, yeah. Well, okay. So you could give him like, 8 to 10 power play points if things go well in that scenario. And I also think that the Devils will could score more goals than the Sabres did last year. But like Owen Power had 8 power play points last year from the second unit, 36-point pace. Is there reason to think like, are we sure we think that Luke Hughes is poised to do like a whole lot more than that? Like, is it worth like, sure, I'm not like last round, great schedule to start, go for it. But I'm seeing Luke Hughes go like ahead of that. I'm just checking his ADP.
Yeah, he's going in the 13th round, which is way higher than that.
Yeah, 188 out of 252. Ahead of like Brock Besser and Carter Hart are like right there, but like ahead of defensemen Spurgeon, Sanderson, Klingberg, Tyson Barrie. Like these aren't Dmitry Orlov, Jeff Petrie. These aren't
these are boring defenseman picks that might be free agency. So
they are pretty boring picks. So maybe that's it. Maybe this is the point of the draft where folks are thinking like, oh yeah, like I'll take the swing on Luke Hughes. But like, I don't know. I saw the same sort of excitement around Owen Power last year. And like, I'm just not sure like how much room there is for Luke Hughes to actually have some kind of breakout season.
Yeah, I don't find those defensemen in that range actually that boring. I mean, there are some boring players in there, but and guys that I would draft. But I think like Forsling is someone who I'd rather have for the start of the season because he has a chance at running the top power play in Florida as long as Montour's out or Ekblad's out at least. Or if you wait a little bit after Hughes is going, maybe Klingberg has a chance at the top power play in Toronto. They were shifting Riley off last year without even having anyone really to replace him. So they just went 5 forwards. I think both of those guys have a better chance. And I don't know, I'm excited about Hughes long term, but I think he's being drafted way ahead of a lot of the other rookies and he should be down in those like 17th round with them.
Yeah, I think it's the kind of thing for me, like Gustav Forsling, sure, might be good to start because of might be on the top power play. Maybe not, maybe it's Oliver Ekman-Larsson, like you suggested before. I think the excitement with someone like Luke Hughes, but it depends like how high you draft him. Like, I don't want to go crazy here. I'm not like, so like, I don't want to be like the person that's like reaching for him like crazy. But I think like when you're getting to this point in the draft where you have a bunch of defensemen who are just going to be like pretty close to replacement, maybe you have a couple exceptions, but like, why not take the guy that maybe has a 20% chance, 10% chance to end up being great, even though like maybe you'll end up dropping him. But like he is like, if you go to like the Athletic and look at this, like their most recent article, that's like their top 50 top prospects, like it was just dropped recently by Scott Wheeler, and like Luke Hughes is the top defenseman in the whole list, right, at 7th overall. Like he's just like so good. So when Brian said, like, is there a reason to believe he'll have an opportunity? I think the reason to believe it is just because he's like so like freaking good, but he still has to earn a spot over Dougie Hamilton, which is going to be tough. And like maybe even blah blah
He
blah blah. Blah.
won't.
I'm just
Like,
saying, like, I'm
yeah.
just saying, like, he's such a good player that I wouldn't mind having like a lottery ticket at this point in the draft. Because if we're talking like, oh, or I could take Tyson Barrie, who's for sure behind, like Yosi, and like also might even get benched for games like we've seen happen before in his career. Like, just give me
But
like
maybe
the
on
guy who
a
has a
3F2D power play.
maybe. So yeah, I'd rather take the maybe high upside once it's like guys that I think are close to replacement level anyways, but maybe that's, but again, like I'm not reaching, if you were to tell me more exciting defenseman names, like, and Jake Sanderson I actually really like also for a similar reason, right? I think he has a ton of upside. And so I wouldn't include him in my list of boring defensemen, but I'm trying this year in Cupful. I want to take I think this is a good draft strategy in general, a reasonable number of swings. I don't want to take too many swings. I don't want my whole roster to need to like be lottery ticket hits in order for me to be successful, but I want to have like 5, let's say, like swings that are of guys that have super high upside that might be nothing and I'll drop them, but might also be like these like league winning picks. Like, how the hell did you get Luke Hughes in the 16th round and he turned out to be a 50-point oh my god, like, like it happens every year, right, where there's these guys that fell super far.
You want to be the guy.
I want to be the one who has
guys.
that person.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you, like the consensus, taking that all the way back to the start of the episode, Ekman Larsson's been drafted in 2 leagues, and you mentioned Forsling. I'm like, oh, I should check. Forsling's been drafted in 21. So I think of our mock drafts. So I think that's out of 24. So that
I mean, I like Forsling. I have him in my dynasty
league. Me too.
So.
So Trev, I know like one question you've been asking, like at the end of every mock draft was like, you were asking people who their favorite picks were, like the guys that, everyone's thinking at the end of their draft that they're going to have the guy that Elon was just talking about, like, how did you get that guy? So like, have you noticed any trends in who people are feeling like most satisfied with? Like, I'm even curious to know, like, if it's people that they drafted early on or middle or late in our Cupful setup. But where on the spectrum between 1 and 252 these guys fall, and like if there's been any discernible trends from the sort of draft picks that are getting people the most excited.
So, I mean, there's a lot of answers, but I'd say I looked at all of them and I'd put them in 3 categories. You got the bounce back category, you got sleepers, and you got the breakout candidates, so for some examples for bounce backs, you've got Huberdeau and Ehlers. Some people have said that those were their favorite picks because they're convinced that is Ehlers a bounce back? We've had you guys have had that discussion. Sleepers, you've got Ghost Despair. I just wrote Ghost Bear.
That counts.
Zaka, Bertuzzi, Matheson, Brown. And then for breakout candidates, we got McTavish, Heaton, Fantilli, Cooley, like all of those, like those guys have all been mentioned. So
yeah. And probably like with those breakouts, just to like finish my point from before, like maybe only one of them will break out, but maybe one of them will break out like big.
But you want to just have,
yeah. Well, I'll just take all 4, and then but obviously depending who I'm leaving, if I have all 4, then I get one. I get the one. But yeah, those are all fun names. Brian, anyone jump out at you that you wanted to talk about from that list?
Oh, well, it's interesting how many of them we've already covered. Right?
Yeah, exactly. We're on top of this.
Huberdeau is like a really like interesting one, right? Because you're like, I feel like no one is drafting Huberdeau at the right spot this year. You're overdrafting him or underdrafting him. I mean, someone's going to get him at the right time, probably. But his ADP right now is 80th. For some reason, over the last 5 mocks, his ADP has jumped 12 spots. Like, it's one of the biggest jumps over the last 5 mocks we've seen. So that would put him like 68th if that holds. But the forwards, Huberdeau is being drafted ahead of our Buchnevich, who I think I'd prefer, Pavelski, Boldy, Ehlers, Toffoli, Reinhardt, Scheifele, Nichushkin, Nachas. Like, it's drafting Huberdeau is going to be tricky. And Elon, last year, he was on my do not draft list, and I always have to pair that with so was Matthew Tkachuk. So like, it was not necessarily the right decision to have, but like, just because of the change in situation this year, Huberdeau is not on my do not draft list, but I am still a little scared to do it. Elon, would you draft Jonathan Huberdeau in any league this year? Like,
mean,
of course,
obviously,
at the right time, but
Mhm.
like assume like 80, like around that crop of forwards that I just named.
I don't think so. Like, and maybe I'll miss out, but I don't see a reason why he'll like be so like, I know he was great before in Florida, but like he's like lost good players to play with. Like he's not gaining, like he's lost to Foley now. Like who know, maybe like guys brought up like Peltier or someone like might jump in and be good, but it's like, I don't know. I'm not like super excited about him. And like, you bring up guys like Ehlers, who I feel like has more upside at this point. Like Sam Reinhart, we talked about as a green boy last year, like was really good in the second half. I'd feel more confident, but who knows? Like my gut, this is like a gut feeling. Cause like, how can we predict a guy who went from like 110 points to like 60-point pace, less than that? But my gut says that I'm not super excited, but like if he falls a little bit further, like maybe, I'll take him ahead of Nachas, Nichushkin, but I think I'll take like the Scheifele, Reinhardt, Ehlers group before him. That's my gut right now. And also I'm going to like, pour over a ton of mocks and a ton of like projections and kind of, maybe reassess. I don't know. What do you think?
Are you asking me?
I don't know. I'm asking.
Oh,
yeah.
I already shared. So I said, well, Mason. Oh, Trev, I saw your hand go up, but now it's gone.
Here, how about Mason?
My question was going to add to Brian's question. It was like, of the two bounce back candidates, would you have taken Ehlers or Huberdeau? And I think you answered that. You'd say you'd probably rather Ehlers.
I also just like guys who take a lot of shots, right? So
I'd
that's like
rather
my
Ehlers too.
weakness. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mason, what do you think about is Huberdeau someone you would take at around this spot or not?
I don't think I would, and I took him in a mock or two when he was going later. I think he's jumped these 12 spots in the last 5, but he's also jumped, a round or two from where he was going in the early mocks. And I think that might be, with the ADP sheet coming out as well as the Fantrax ranking, he actually shows up now. Whereas before, if you sorted anything by last year's stats, you're not going to find him on any list. And so people just weren't thinking about him, myself included. And that's why he was falling so far. Yeah, I just don't know if he's going only at the end of the 5th round, like in these last mocks, there's just not that much upside. Even if he bounces back, like he has to have a very significant bounce back to, even be good and to provide value at this spot. And yeah, I can only really see his ceiling kind of going up a round and a half from where he's being drafted. And it's just not worth the risk when he was so bad last year.
Yeah, like I brought up Rob Thomas early on, saying how like even if he has like a really good year, like an 80-point year, he might only be barely above replacement just because he doesn't shoot too much. Like Huberdeau shot 1.6 shots per game last year and like no peripherals, no hits, no block. Well, actually, I shouldn't say no hits. Like he had 65 hits.
But. Do you think though, like Daryl Sutter told him, like if you take 2 shots a night, like I'm taking your ice time down 10 minutes, like you're off the top. Like I feel like there were like some background threats around like how Huberdeau, like I'm really interested to see Huberdeau get a fresh start with an organization that is moving on completely from last year. In the same vein, or not in the same vein actually, but I just wanted to point out like of the names you mentioned, Trev, that people were saying were their favorite picks. We talked about Kim Atkinson and Elvis Merzlikins as guys who you might want to like dig deep. You're not going to find them by most draft room rankings. So like you're going to want to go out of your way to make sure they're on the list. Elon, you mentioned Connor Brown earlier, who Trev mentioned in his list too. And one other name that you're going to want to go digging for. And like, we'll do a whole show on like the Yahoo rankings once they like stabilize somewhat from the mess that they've been released as. But like Pavel Zacha is another guy that you're going to want to like manually add to your list. Cause if you sort the usual ways, you might not find him in your draft room. Oh, Josh Norris, Mason's also pointing out. And yeah, that's right. If you sort the traditional ways, you won't find him. Trev?
Oh, you're muted.
To go back to Huberdeau, to defend him a little bit, like it was never reasonable to expect the 3 shots a game that he was getting in his last year in Florida to stay that, because he was like a 2 shots per game guy in years previously. And then also Sutter played him on his wrong wing for like 70% of the season, which didn't help him.
Yeah. So maybe there's room for a bounce back, but it's just like, how much does he have to bounce back to be worth drafting?
I'm not, I don't think 5th round is reasonable either.
Yeah. Maybe 70 points, like seems something he can do. I mean, again, like Calgary's like very, like we have a new coach and we're saying like, oh, Sutter just totally, pooped the bed and didn't know what he was doing at all. But like, there's no guarantee the next coach will be that much better. But I guess we'll find out. Who is it? Who is it, by the way? Who is the coach?
The coach, Ryan Huska.
Yeah, who's that?
That's such a good question. I have not read like any kind of profile on this guy. Like, I have no idea he was drafted in the 3rd round by Chicago in 1993, native of Cranbrook, BC. I have his hockey DB page up here, of course. He's 48 years old. This is going into this is age 48 season that he's making his NHL coaching debut.
But he was assistant coach to Sutter like last season. Does that mean that?
Yeah, I don't know. I really don't know.
We need to have an interview with him and need to know, like, were you gritting your teeth at all these bad decisions the whole time, or were you like championing it and like suggesting it to Sutter?
Yeah. What was your role in all this? He only played one. This is not what you want to know. I'm ready to detail his whole minor league career. He played one NHL game with Chicago where he did not tally.
He's like that doctor in Field of Dreams. Didn't he like only get one game?
I've never seen the movie.
Oh,
this is one of those
good.
embarrassing movie admissions, which I'm full of them. I haven't seen any movie.
And then he like asks him, like, do you regret like not like ever getting to play? It was like your dream. And then he's like, no, because I became a doctor and like I got to save all these children's lives. And it was all like, it was very emotional to me at the time. I don't know if it holds up. I remember it pretty well. Anyway,
I think Field of Dreams gets brought up a disproportionate amount on this podcast.
I like that movie. We should have a Keeping Karlsson and patron movie night, and I'll watch Field of Dreams. But anyhow, this has been so fun, man. The time has flown by. I can't believe it's already been almost 2 hours. But I think we got through both of your lists of observations. Are we missing anything? Trev, is there anything else you wanted to bring up to take us out of here? Oh, okay, so let me edit this again. Let me say it again. Mason, is there anything you wanted to bring up before we end this broadcast?
Yeah, I think this tracks with some of the last couple things we've been talking about in terms of drafting for upside and what kind of risk you're willing to take on and where you can find value. And one place that I noticed that some players like that could be found is in like the 11th round. Max Pacioretty and Patrick Kane are both going currently. And Mark Stone is also kind of one that's on my radar, but he's going a little bit earlier. But I could see Pacioretty and Kane each having great seasons once they're playing. And obviously there's some injury concerns with them. They might not, either of them might not be ready to start the season. But in a league like this where you really need to do well in the playoffs, I think like if you're able to draft these kind of players in the 11th round, even if they don't play for the first month or two, they could end up being so valuable for your team later. And hoping for, say, a Huberdeau bounce back or a breakout from Luke Hughes, when you can get these guys way later than Huberdeau or just before Luke Hughes. I think they have a way higher chance of providing, multiple rounds of value, if not like 7 rounds, where they give you like a 4th round value or better once they come back. So those are a couple of guys that I'm looking at that I love grabbing. If you're fading D and goalies and say you've taken 8 forwards in your first 10 picks, you've got all your forward roster spots filled up, then grabbing a couple guys like these to sit on your bench or go into IR, and then you can grab some early streamers. Seems like a great strategy to me.
Yeah, I actually really love the idea of ending the draft with a couple of IR eligible players because it is so fun to stream at the start. And sometimes you draft too well. You're like, you don't have anyone you want to drop. You like everyone you drafted. You want to see how they're going to do. So it's nice if you just force yourself to like have a couple open spots so you can stream. And then, yeah, if you get a free Pacioretty, like I think we all kind of agree that if Pacioretty's healthy, he's probably going to be really good. Like he's always been really good in fantasy, like for so long. He's like, even in the years when he was like slowing down a bit in Vegas, like when he first got there, he was still like shooting a lot. He was still like worth rostering. So I really like that advice, and it'll be fun to even see where Patrick Kane goes. Yeah, I wouldn't mind starting the year with both of those guys in my IR. Can I throw one quick, I was trying to come up with my own draft tip. And I think one thing that I feel like a lot of people give the advice when you're doing snake draft is like, you want to kind of have a sense of the ADPs, and like using Kevin's sheet is really useful because you don't want to like take a guy early when you could have like waited around, and gotten him at the round later. So even if like you like this guy the best, like, you still might not want to take him because you could just like wait and get him later. And that's kind of like the draft strategy. So I just want to like push back a little bit on that common advice, which I don't even know if you guys would like espouse that advice, but like, just keep in mind, there's like all it takes is one person to like agree with you on that player, and then you don't get him. And like in my mocks, actually, it's fun. I thought of this because you brought up Pacioretty, and he was someone who I had in my watch list in one of my mocks. And I was thinking like, yeah, he would be a good guy to end up with, but like I'm sure he won't get taken. Like I think I could still take like another guy, and I'll get Pacioretty in my next pick, and then I got sniped. And I feel like that happens a lot. So I would say like, don't be too afraid to like reach for someone if like you really believe in that guy. Like, and don't reach like 5 rounds ahead, but like it's like you're probably, especially if in a couple, you're probably drafting with a lot of smart people. And if you think you're smart, like, and I guess maybe that's tough. Like if you think like, that Taylor Hall is going to be like someone worth drafting like the first 3 rounds, maybe then you should like hold yourself back. But like, if you think that like this guy might be worth reaching for because you think he has the upside to like be really good, like there might be someone else in the draft that feels the same way. So I wouldn't like beat yourself up if like, according to Kevin's sheet, like he does this really cool thing afterward, kind of like it ranks the draft and tells people like how well they did in terms of like how many players you reached for based on their ADP versus how many guys you got at a good discount. Like, I don't mind having a bad score in Kevin's sheet if like I'm happy with the players and I think they're going to perform for those picks. So just something to maybe throw out there to close out. Any thoughts, Brian? I see you got something you want to say about that.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say like I have one draft. Like I'm not saying anything new, but like anecdotally, in the cupful, like I'm with you on that. Don't take a chance that the guy you want is going to be around. But I do have like a friends, like a home league friends draft where basically my whole draft is predicting, like trying to figure out what draft list everyone else is using and predicting when, like how late I can leave certain guys, and basically playing the whole draft on the razor's edge. And like it works out for probably like, I don't know, 7 out of 10 guys. And it really like, it feels great for the 7. It stings so hard for the 3. But at the end of the day, I'm not sure like I really get mad missing out on those few, or like feel, it's always like we're just taking our best guess at the start of the season. But it can be a fun game to play in a casual league. Like how late can I get this guy? But if you really like want to win, I am 100% with you, Elon. It just takes one other manager to take your pick away that you think you're gonna like coast to later on. Trev, you have one thing to add, and then I think we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, I think it comes back to like, if you go back to, your personal sleepers, you take a look at, when they're going, don't take them in that round, because there's no guarantee that you're going to get them in that round. Like take them, again, if you're very, very high on them, maybe you take them a round and a half early. Like, make sure that if you're very high on a guy, just get the guy.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. So this has been so fun. You guys are great. I feel like I could just keep chatting for like another hour. Like I think easily it's so fun. I always said the same thing at the end of the podcast with Victor also. Brian, I don't say it when we do shows, but it's not because I don't feel the same way, but just we always have more shows to do. But I was like, oh no, we're done our show with Mason and Trev. But yeah, it would be great to have you guys back on sometime because it's clearly your stuff. You've been doing so many mock drafts. This has been a blast. I guess I'll throw to Mason first. Is there anything you want to like tell people about, to check out, anything you want to promote?
I have nothing to promote, as Dave calls me Twitterless Mason. Yeah, I'm on Threads, Twitterless Mason, but nothing there to look at yet. So you can find me in the Discord along with everyone else.
Okay, and thanks for
we actually
supporting us for
we have a
5 years
contract
now
with Mason that he does not post anywhere but in our Discord server as like a patron perk. Like this is the one way to reach Mason online.
That's pretty good. And Trev, yeah, thanks so much for coming on. Great debut on the show. Anything you want to throw out there for people to check out?
I am also Twitterless Trevor. And you can only find me on the Discord.
Okay, well then we definitely don't mind you're using your promo time to promote joining our Discord, because you can hang out with cool people like these guys.
Get a contract set up with you too.
All right. So then with that, thanks everyone for listening. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Let us know what you thought. You can hit us up in the Discord, of course, in the KK episode discussion channel. If you're still on the Twitter, tweet at us. We wouldn't mind a 5-star review. If you really like the show, you want to help us out. That's always a nice thing you can do. And yeah, like we've been talking about, come play in this league, the couple. And the first step is to become a patron of Keeping Karlsson. That's one of the many perks. You get to hang out with Mason and Trev in the Discord and also play in our league. And we even have more. So check out keepingkarlsson.com/patron for info on how to become a patron, or kakupful.com, kkupfl.com for information about the league specifically. But with that, Brian, let's cue the outro music. And why don't you read us the credits and take us out of here?
All right. Just scrolling too. I don't know how I wasn't ready, but here I am. All right. This episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast was presented by Dauber Hockey and powered by our patrons, including our super supporters, Aaron, Ivan, Andrea, Zachary, Tom, Derek, David, Rob, Ricard, and Patty. Thank you to our couple coordinator, Kevin Hebert, who we are working, like Elon, Kevin, and I. We had an official call to get, we have some dates lined up. We're going to announce them soon on our Discord server, but registration for the Cupful, we're not kidding around. It's happening. It's in full swing. If you're not in yet and you want to be, KKUPFL, Elon already said all that, so I won't even finish the .com part. Yeah, anyway, game day news, or gamedaytweets.com is where you're going to find Elon and Sham still rolling out all the fancy news. We are on Blue Sky, if that matters to anyone. Are
we tweeting there, Brian?
I might have an invite. I don't know. I haven't checked lately, but if you promise to follow us, we could use the clout. I did tweet there. I skeeted there.
Okay.
That's the
I just feel like if you're promoting Blue Sky, you got to actually do something on there.
I did about our last episode when we released it, and I'm thinking maybe it wasn't
an actual interesting. It was just kind of check out our latest episode.
Yeah,
no one's gonna follow us just for that. They already found the episode. I was
thinking of being more interesting on Blue Sky, but
right.
I'm just double posting to Twitter also.
This is a promise from Brian that this week there's going to be a couple interesting pieces of content on Blue Sky.
But exclusively, you want me to keep it off our Twitter?
Yeah, you threw it out there. I want a couple. It's
it'll be on.
You can only find if you follow us on Blue Sky.
Okay.
Well, why would they follow us on Blue Sky then if it's also on Twitter?
Well, because maybe you don't spend time on Twitter these days. Anyway, logo art by BrandonWeeb.com. Outro music by Pat Roach. This episode was researched with help from Dauber Hockey, Frozen Tools, Dauber Prospects, Natural Stat Trick, Evolving Hockey, Cap Friendly, The Athletic, Hockey Reference, Hockey Viz, Hockey Database, Elite Prospects, and Fantrax for its amazing mock draft functioning. Always open 24/7, 366. I should have put an 8 in the middle there. But always open. Thank you, Fantrax, and for the slow draft functionality too. You rule.
Great job as always, Brian. Thanks again for the interesting discussion, Mason and Trev. And Brian, I guess we'll be back next week to finish our Red Boys, which we never did. We have an episode planned where we're going to talk about players from last season that were great in the first half and then took a real nosedive in the second half. And we're going to figure out what happened probably next week or the week after. But Brian, what should people be doing while they're waiting for that episode to drop?
Well, you are. Please keep doing all you can, no matter what social media or real life space you inhabit. Keep doing all you can to make sure that fantasy hockey is for everyone.
Follow me on LinkedIn. Do we have a Keeping Karlsson LinkedIn set up?
Actually, I think you did, so you could add it to your own personal LinkedIn page, works at Keeping Karlsson. I think it exists.
I'll post some content there. All right, see you everyone.
Trev, Mason, thank you so much for being here, for jumping on and being game. It was awesome.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Didn't get a chance to say it on the show, but it was a lot of fun.
How did I do?
Amazing. I think it was
great.
Really good.
You crushed it.
I feel
Early nerves, I could tell, but you settled in. You did great.
Yeah, and I'm gonna edit
again. I'm not a public speaker usually, so
no, it was great. I feel like at the start there was a few dead air moments, but then but after the first couple times you talked, every other time you sounded just like a natural podcaster. You just it was great.
Amazing.
Cool. But yeah, thanks so much.
Okay, great.
Bye everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.